Good afternoon. The November 16, 2021 Board Workshop is now in session. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
And Mrs. Campbell?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, this afternoon we will hold a rule development workshop on policy 0169.1, 2520, 2521, 3220, 8141, and 8710. Following the conclusion of rule development, we will hold a workshop on facility capacity and a Head Start update. We are now at the rule development portion of the workshop. Is there anyone present who wishes to address the revisions to Board Policy 0169.1, public participation at board meetings? Is there anyone present who wishes to address the revisions to Board Policy 0169.1, public participation at board meetings? Is there anyone present who has come to address the revisions to Policy 2520, selection and adoption of instructional materials? Is there anyone present who has come to address the revisions to Policy 2520, selection and adoption of instructional materials? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 2521, instructional materials program? Is there anyone present who has come to address the revisions to Policy 2521, instruction materials program? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 3220, evaluation of personnel? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 3220, evaluation of personnel? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 8141, mandatory reporting of misconduct by employees? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 8141, mandatory reporting of misconduct by employees? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 8710, insurance? Is there anyone present who's come to address the revisions to Policy 8710, insurance? Does any board member have anything regarding these policies they would like to discuss? Ms. Campbell?
In the workshop, the revised policy for public participation, they'll leave the cameras on. I asked Paul what we could do for tonight. So he said we could have a motion before that time in the agenda to go ahead and leave them on, and we could vote on that this evening. So hopefully I see consensus. So.
All right, anyone else? I have just a quick thing, and it is on the instructional materials and instruction materials program. And it's nothing of any significance whatsoever, Ms. Klein. It's actually a formatting issue with the policy. If you go through, there are several places where spaces were left out. And I started documenting each of them, and I was like, this is going to take forever. So if we can just do a quick...
Neola is supposed to fix all of that when they get it. So
Okay.
they're supposed to do all the formatting and everything and make sure it looks right.
Okay,
So if they don't, when it gets posted by Neola, we'll check it and make sure it's right.
okay, super. That was the only thing I had. All right, anything else on any of these policies, board? All right. That will conclude our rule development. We will now move on to the facility capacity workshop items. Sue Han, Assistant Superintendent of Facilities Services, will provide us the information. Ms. Han. Good afternoon.
And I'm excited to be able to present to you today some of the things we've been working on in facilities. But I wanted to start and talk a little bit about things that keep me awake at night, and I know they keep others awake at night too. And this kind of started with Ms. Lisinski's budget presentation back in October. And she's tracking numbers for different reasons than I'm tracking numbers. But regardless, the trends that we're seeing in the growth of the district, the growth of charter schools, the growth of scholarship enrollment, as well as the trend with BPS enrollment, I think is something that we should all be concerned about. And I know she talked about that from a budget perspective, and from a facilities perspective, it is equally concerning. And so I wanted to just bring that up because that is something that we've been looking at on the planning side. Karen Black and Dave Lindeman have been doing some analysis, and you've seen some of these charts before. But this is kind of another way of showing the data that Ms. Lisinski presented that shows on the top scale, the percentage of total student membership attending charter schools, and you can see the trend is increasing, as well as the percentage of total membership attending district traditional schools. That trend is trending downward. Same data that Ms. Lisinski presented, just showing it a slightly different way. We'll be incorporating these into our updated student accommodation plan. This is from the budget presentation, again, shows similar data in just a slightly different way. And this is a graph that Ms. Black did, and it shows the percentage of public school students attending charter schools by grade in school year 14-15, and then compares that to school year 21-22. And you can see back in, for example, school year 14-15, first grade kindergarten was about 10%, and today that percentage is 16 to 17%. So you can see that the trend is showing an increase in enrollment and engagement in charter schools over time. And then this graph is one that Karen developed for us as well. The top shows the percent of kindergarten students that are enrolled in charter schools. And so you can kind of see the kindergarten enrollment overall is relatively flat, but the percent of kindergarten students that are enrolled in charter schools is increasing at a fairly significant rate. So back in 14-15, that was 10.5%. In 21-22, we're over 17%. And then the bottom graph, I wanted to show you that because I think it also tells a story. The bottom graph shows the school year 13-14 kindergarten class was at 10%. And if you track that cohort through today, when that cohort is in 8th grade, the percent of students in that grade that are enrolled in charter schools is over 14%. So this cohort starts at 10, and by the time it gets to 8th grade, it's now at 15%. So not only is the aggregate cumulative number of charter school student enrollment percentage increasing, but the cohort gets bigger as it goes through our system. So I think, with all that being said, it's important that we all work together to make sure that we are delivering quality education in Brevard Public Schools. And facilities has a role to play in that. And I've talked to the board and our senior staff as to the importance that facilities plays in supporting the educational mission. But I also think that we're starting to look even broader than that, and we have to be a partner with our other cabinet members and their teams as to how we can deliver outstanding education in Brevard schools. So that's kind of the thing that keeps me up at night and makes me think about what can we do innovatively, what can we do differently, what we can do to support our education mission. So that's kind of the lead off of our presentation, but the rest of this is pretty perfunctory information that you probably have seen bits and pieces of it before. I just wanted to summarize kind of where we are in facilities. So we have really, really good news on the revenue side. All of our revenue sources are stable and increasing, and that's great because it allows us to do more things on the capital side, whether it's surtax, impact fees, or local capital. But on the bad news side, previously mentioned, we've been experiencing sort of random material equipment and labor shortages. Really kind of hard to predict. We had issues with roofing about 6-8 months ago. Those seem to be dissipating a little bit. We've had trouble getting electrical components. We've had a little trouble with machinery like pumps and things like that. So our folks are kind of nervous about where this might be heading when we have something go down at a school and we have to fix it, and our suppliers and our subcontractors don't have it. That's going to be a difficult day for us. So our supply issues may be, well, they're definitely affecting costs, they're definitely affecting schedule. So when I talk about our projects, these are all kind of our plans, but the marketplace is going to dictate to some extent what we can move forward with over time. So just to recap our resources for facilities, we have educational impact fees and capital and sales surtax, and these overlap. The educational impact fees can only be used for additional student capacity. So new seats, new classrooms, it doesn't have to be an entire school, but we have to provide new student stations. Capital is our most flexible source, and sales surtax is applicable to only those things that were approved in the sales surtax plan. Now, from a state law perspective, there's a much broader use of those funds, but we in Brevard have chosen, when we presented our plans to the voters, to do certain things with our sales surtax. So the overlap between educational impact fees and capital really falls in debt service. So debt service for new student stations can be paid out of educational impact fees, and we use some of our revenue stream for that. And then the overlap with capital and sales surtax is pretty strong. Almost everything that is sales surtax eligible is also capital eligible. The reverse is not necessarily true. So when we're doing capital project planning, I'm always looking at all three of those sources and how to best allocate our revenue streams. So on the good news side, you've seen this slide as well. Ms. Lisinski presented that in her July budget workshop that showed that our property values are increasing, which has given us additional capital resources. And you saw that as part of the budget development process. We had our initial capital plan, and then we were able to add on some additional projects and programs in our capital plan because of this exact situation. We had some additional revenue that we think will be able to be invested in capital. On the surtax side, this shows you the monthly surtax revenues through the life of the program. So you can see in calendar year 21, the black bar to the farthest right, you can see that our revenues are really doing well. We're probably in the 16 to 20% above the 2019 revenues, so it's really, really good. Our economy is strong, and our revenues are really good. So that gives us a little bit more flexibility in executing our plan. And we've been working with the Citizens Oversight Committee in terms of moving things up a little bit, making some additional investments. And they've really taken on that oversight role when we've tried to make adjustments to the plan that make sense for Brevard. And then educational impact fees, that's our third revenue source for capital. Again, there are two districts, so the line is kind of about Barnes Boulevard between north and south, and you have to spend the impact fees in the district in which they were collected. These are imposed, collected, and administered by Brevard County. So in our process, we have an impact fee benefit district advisory committee. It includes representatives from the municipalities in Brevard County in each district. And we, the staff of Brevard Public Schools, we provide our recommended allocation of impact fees. The committee actually acts on that recommendation and makes a recommendation to the school board, which then goes to the commission. Our last round of this happened, I think we met in October. The board acted on that in October, and then December 7th, I believe, is when the county commission will act on it. So then once the county commission acts, then the funds are transmitted to Brevard schools in order to invest in our project. So it can take 3 to 4 months to get through that process, and that will become relevant a little later in the presentation. But again, our revenues are strong. There's a lot of residential growth. Impact fees for the education are only charged on residential growth. So you can see in the south, we're generating about $13 million a year, and in the North Benefit District, about $3.5 million a year. That's been consistent for the last couple of years. So this is a slide that shows about what we have reserved for projects through September 2021. So these are impact fee collections through September 2021. And so we have $10 million and change for a South Elementary School. There's $17 million for Central Area Secondary. And then we have some sort of holding pot for classroom additions. So as we see growth happening in certain geographic areas, we might be able to add on classroom additions as we need to. So I'll be working closely with our leading and learning partners on that. And then we do typically recommend some allocation for debt service, about a quarter of our revenue. Oh, I did want to say that we can reallocate funds. So and I'll talk about that relative to a specific project, but if we feel that, for example, we need to invest more in a particular project, we can go through the process, starting with the benefit district advisory committees, to reallocate that money to a different program as long as it is in the same benefit district. So this is how we have been programming our funds. The South Area Elementary School, we've been monitoring development in Palm Bay and West Melbourne specifically. Those are the two high growth areas. A new elementary school is 25-ish million, and it seems likely that there will be a need for an elementary school in those areas, so that's something that we'll probably be thinking seriously about. It's just a matter of what location, because one is probably going to be our ability under educational impact fee funding. So we're going to have to think about that carefully. In Central Area Secondary, we have already committed to a classroom addition at Vieira High School. That's probably going to consume about 9 million of the 17 that we have reserved. And then we'll be planning and working on design for a new middle school in the Vieira area, and that's probably about a $40 to $45 million investment. South Area Classrooms, we have about 3.2 million reserved at this point. Again, we can start small with classroom additions, or we could consider reallocating those funds perhaps to an elementary school if we felt that that was the priority. And then in the North Area, we think most likely we'll be doing some classroom additions to some schools in the North Area, so we'll be working with Ms. Klein in that area. There's quite a bit of development activity that is north of that impact fee line as well, in Titusville and Cocoa, and some in the unincorporated area. So I do feel confident that that will be something that we're talking about in the near future. What Dave and Karen specifically have been doing is meeting with each of our municipalities and Brevard County in the high growth areas and trying to kind of get ahead of these growth patterns so we understand where there are developments proposed and where we might influence the language in the development agreement. So sometimes you see a development agreement where a developer of a large tract is required to provide school capacity in some manner. In some of the development orders we saw a few years ago, there was specific language about charters, and we'd like to come to that table too and offer that choice. So we want to work closely with our municipal partners, and Dave and Karen have taken on that initiative to be a little bit more involved in that process. So this is a list of the major projects we have going on right now, and I'm going to go through these each for you. The MIMS cafetorium is funded through capital, but we are using a debt service offset, as I've talked about before. We have educational impact fees in the North Area that we have used for debt service, which lowers our use of capital for debt service, and then we invest that capital in the MIMS cafetorium. We have Vieira High School classroom addition that is solely funded with educational impact fees, as the middle school X in Vieira. And the transportation maintenance facility, that funding for that is probably going to be capital and potentially a combination of sales surtax reallocation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then the firefighting academy at Palm Bay Magnet High School, that was in our most recent impact fee allocation recommendation, so that is currently at the county commission level, and once that is approved, we'll move forward with that as well. So the MIMS cafetorium is about a 12,000 square foot building. It will be a hurricane shelter, which is something that's badly needed in the North Area. We've coordinated that with our partners at the County Emergency Management Office. Typically that increases the cost of a facility. So it does make it cost more, but on the other hand, I think, in terms of public service, this is a really good location for a hurricane shelter. So we're happy to support that. There's some new traffic circulation patterns there at MIMS too that will make things a little bit more efficient and a little bit safer. And then working with Ms. Klein's office to figure out how we repurpose the current cafetorium that's way too small, but hopefully we can do some good programs there. This project is currently in the RFQ process. They have gone through the committee process, and you will see a recommendation on your December meeting agenda for the award of that contract for a construction manager. So we're pretty much ready to go with that. This just gives you a kind of a schematic of the new cafetorium and where it's located and the new pavement for the MIMS project. The Vieira High School Classroom Edition, we are going through a process where we have hired a design professional to do kind of a 30% design, and that is incorporated into a design criteria package, and then that is put out in the procurement for a design builder. So that process is just about done, and we anticipate going out for a design builder solicitation sometime probably in January. So that will be ready to go shortly as well. The architectural features of this building, it is a one-story building, but our goal is to make it look similar to the other side of Vieira High School, so architecturally it'll look about the same. And this shows you the floor plan, and again, when we go out for RFQ for a design builder, they will have a designer as part of their team, and it may look a little different. They may come in and say, you know, it's better if you put CTE over here and the bathrooms over there, so that's certainly possible. But this gives at least everyone who is proposing on it kind of an idea of how big it is and what the purposes are. Yes, sir.
Madam. And just for the purpose of everybody, in the event that the capacity at Vieira High School goes up, you can convert CTE classrooms into classrooms. You can do, so one of the issues that we have inside my district is that they're worried about the capacity of the high school, but it can always increase. I just want to make that as part of the comment. That's all. Yes,
sir, and along those lines, we're planning for that because you see the portables on the side of that graphic. We're going to leave the portables that are there for that very reason, because Vieira is continuing to grow, and we want to make sure that we can support the students that will be going to Vieira High School and working with Dr. Sullivan's office, not to overgrow the school, but to make sure that we do have seats for kids that are zoned there. So the next project is Middle School X, and I've been trying very hard to learn to say Middle School X. Because when I said Vieira Area Elementary School, we ended up with Vieira Elementary School. So, so the entire purpose of Middle School X is to just leave the naming a little bit more broad. The last time I talked to you about this, we were hoping to acquire a site that was kind of in the vicinity of the Vieira Middle School. There's also some property kind of near the Costco, I guess it's almost open Costco. In talking with Mr. Procura at the Vieira company, their infrastructure is not going to be there in time to support our middle school needs. And so we determined that it's probably better that we move forward now, and we will be using the site that is adjacent to Vieira High School. So establishing the boundaries for that is going to be a project. And so we're going to need to have extensive stakeholder involvement in that. But I felt like we can get going on the design and get started on the design construction process and then kick off the stakeholder engagement. So where we are with that is we'll be issuing a request for qualifications for middle school prototype design. I anticipate that will be advertised in December, so that process will go through the early spring. So I would anticipate seeing something on your agenda in probably March to select a prototype design architect. We're using some examples out of, I think, Orange County. They had prototype contracts that I think will work for us. So that process is underway. This just shows you the relationship of the middle school site north of Vieira High School to our other middle schools, and illustrates that the boundaries are going to be a bit of a challenge, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. The the funding for Middle School X, I wanted to just kind of bring your attention to this slide because you will have a conversation about this late next year. If we start with the $17 million that we have on the books for Central Area Secondary and we subtract the $9 million for the Vieira High School addition, we're basically going to be starting with a balance of 8 million. And if you assume that we'll be accumulating about 3 million every quarter, you can kind of see the cash flow pattern. And so if we're going to fund a $40 to $45 million project, we won't have the cash in hand until late 2024. So when we are ready to solicit a constructor for this project, we're going to need to have a conversation about the financial aspect of it and how we do this. The impact fee revenues are very strong, so I feel pretty confident that we'll get there. We may want to look at reallocating funds from other projects in the South area when the time comes. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on this because this is something that we'll need to be thinking about when we get to the place where we're ready to solicit for construction. The transportation project, this is one that I'm super excited about, where we're replacing satellite bus. If you recall the photos from the last workshop of the satellite bus compound, we need to do something else there. And also the Pineapple facility that has both transportation and maintenance, that is an asset of the district that perhaps we can put on the market and use that revenue stream to pay for constructing a new facility. And we're looking at somewhere in central Brevard, kind of in the O'Galley area, the West O'Galley area, for a new facility. So where we are with this project is we've hired a design criteria professional, and they have completed our stakeholder interviews. They've talked with maintenance, they've talked with transportation, and they're developing a design concept, which we'll see on the next slide. And we're going to use that for a couple different purposes. One is to find a site. And so we'll be engaging our realtor to do exactly that. And then the second piece is for the RFQ for design build services. So this gives you kind of a layout. It's a concept at this point, but I think we need about 13 acres for the project. And so we'll be looking for property in that West O'Galley, Central Brevard area that would be suitably zoned for this type of activity. And I feel pretty confident that we'll be able to find something. But I'm excited that we're moving ahead with this. This is something that we really need to do. So the funding for this project, this is another interesting decision that we have. And so if you look at the two projects that are on there, two facilities, Satellite Bus and Mid-South, the original sales tax program in 2014 had quite a bit of funding reserved for facility renewal for these two projects. And I have not spent that because we are in fact not planning to use these facilities for district purposes in the future. We've got about $2 million in unallocated sales surtax that we can allocate to other projects, or we can consider allocating them to the transportation project. So what I would like to do is at the December Citizens Oversight Committee meeting is talk to them about the reallocation of funding. We have not used any sales surtax for new facilities. That wasn't the framework for the 2014 sales surtax program. It is absolutely legal to do that. It's just not what the framework was. But I felt that it was at least a reasonable decision to make to consider reallocating the investment in transportation at these two facilities and moving it over to investment in transportation at a new facility. I don't think that's going to cover the entire cost, but it certainly is a step in the right direction. So that is something that we're going to run by the Citizens Oversight Committee. We've talked to them about it in concept a couple of times, and I'm going to ask them for a recommendation at their December meeting. So I'll be able to bring that back to the board for your consideration as well, but that is an upcoming decision that we'll need to make in terms of how we fund the project. We could do something similar with this in terms of reallocating that $2 million to other facility renewal projects that are eligible in the surtax program and use capital to do the transportation project. So if the board and the ICOC are more comfortable with that approach, that's perfectly fine too. But I do think that sets the stage for at least we have some resources to start on this project. So that's the funding for transportation. And then the last project
Sue,
is,
can I
oh, sure.
interject it? Just to clarify, in terms of the funding, just size for the public, for community, the $2 million that Ms. Han is suggesting be considered for a new transportation facility are in fact the same funds that would have been invested in existing transportation
Correct.
facilities. They are not dollars we're taking away from a previously allocated school project or other facility project. And in fact, these funds would not be needed for either of these transportation facilities, if we don't allocate them to a new transportation facility. So we're not taking away from
Correct.
anyone else who's been expecting them or been waiting to have their turn in the project. It's just important that
Right.
our public and community understand.
Yep,
I want to
thank you.
emphasize it again.
Yeah, I've basically set these off to the side pending this discussion. So that will be coming up shortly. Thank you, Dr. Mullins. And then finally, oh, I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
You know, one of the issues that we have that the public needs to understand is that where these buses are located at and the way that they are costs more money for us to coordinate them, to drive them, to work on them, to do everything. So literally, this plan is a cost saver to the overall bottom line. The other issue that we have is that the Pineapple property can be sold. I mean, there's so many benefits to doing this. And on top of that, it's in a neighborhood. So it's rolling all of these buses through neighborhoods, through community. It's something that's a definite positive. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Han, I have a question. I'm looking at on the previous slide, the Mid-South, and you specifically used the word historic, unoccupied historic building. Is that a problem to have a historic building? Some places, they get crazed when you have a historic building and you want to get rid of it. So I'm just curious.
As of right now, it has not been a problem.
Okay,
We don't believe it will be a problem, but that word is on the slide to let you know that that will be part of the discussion, I'm sure, going forward.
thank you.
It's actually Dr. Mullins' old office. It is. And I went in there a couple of years ago to see the condition of it, and he still had paperwork in the basement. But I checked the roof. The roof was in great shape. They must have just redone it. But there's still some old paperwork in there, Dr. Mullins, you might want to go get. But it's a beautiful old house, old building.
It truly does have a basement. I mean, and it has a basement.
It's where
Raises concern in Florida,
Yes,
but
it does.
It's where Dr. Mullins' office, it's where staff put Dr. Mullins when he was there, so.
I wasn't actually in the basement with my
Oh.
office, but there is a basement in the building.
Well, I think too, it may depend on the use. So someone who may purchase this property, given that there's no longer a maintenance yard and a bus yard behind it, could consider redeveloping that site too, so.
I don't know.
I know we've got questions for later, but while we're on this one, you didn't list that as a source of funding. You said potential, but that would be something that could easily also be used for the purchase of the land for the building of the, do you have a ballpark at all of what we won't know what the land cost is, but the actual construction part of it?
I'm guessing in the 3 to 4 million range, but I am totally guessing
Okay.
right now. And we've been accumulating funds for the purchase of the property from the sale of our other properties, so I've been setting that aside as well.
Right, but this would be something, we wouldn't have it until after we've already built the other facility, because we have to keep using Mid-South until the new
Correct.
facility's done. But
Correct.
eventually, we sell that one, we can
Yes.
put that one back into the capital
Yep.
budget.
Yeah, there are some options, I think, based on some interests that we've had in the Mid-South property, where we could conceivably do a contract for sale of Mid-South that would include the purchaser constructing a new facility for us. So when we do the RFP or the public advertisement for this, we will be a little broader in terms of offers we might entertain. And then the last project that I just wanted to highlight that we're moving forward with a CTE project at Palm Bay Magnet High School. The design is underway, and you should see the guaranteed maximum price proposal on your agenda probably about February. So excited to move forward with that too. Student services, we've been trying to focus a little bit more on our student services needs. So our staff has been working closely with Ms. Moore's team, specifically in the ESE arena, and we finished our work at Merritt Island High School, and we have a new BLAST program there, so that was a good project that we did this past summer. We're incorporating BLAST into the Vieira High School project, or the Vieira High School Classroom Edition. And then we did some work at O'Galley High School to support the Varying Exceptionality Supported Behavior Unit, so that's been done. And then we have a hardcourt improvement at South ALC that is, we're working on the construction contract. The pricing, as with some of our projects, has come in a little bit higher than we anticipated, so we're still negotiating that, but hopefully you'll see that on your agenda soon to move forward with that project. And I just want to give you a little update on the sales tax program. You'll get a larger update from the chair of the ICOC at your December meeting. We do have membership transition coming up. 5 of our ICOC members are original, and 4 of them, I think, are ready to retire. So we have been soliciting for new members. We have 5 applications that are on deck, and I'll have our ICOC go through that process of ranking them and making a recommendation to you. So you'll see that probably at your January meeting. And we've, especially with the new sales tax program, we've been working closely with the ICOC because we do move things around a bit. We have a lot of smaller projects, so it's real easy to say, well, we can do, this playground failed, let's move it from year 2 to year 1 type of thing. So we've been using our Citizens Oversight Committee to cross-check those things when we are moving money around. So that process has worked really well. They've also provided really good guidance on the funding that is over the $198 million of the 2014 program. So you often see on your agenda that this has been through the ICOC, and we ask them to look at those allocations. So that's been very helpful as well. Just some projects, and again, we'll go over these in more detail in December, but we've done a lot more HVAC projects with the money that's been left over that $198 million target. So this is just a short list of some of those bigger projects that we've done with HVAC, but I think through the course of the 2014 program, we've done around $120 million worth of air conditioning improvements. So huge, huge investment in air conditioning. And from our perspective, even though we still get the occasional, oh my gosh, the air isn't working issue, the volume and severity of those are pretty small in comparison to where we were 6 years ago. So the 2014 sales tax has absolutely made a difference in how our air conditioning systems perform and the reliability. We also have the last project, the big project that we had in our program was the canopies to our portable classrooms, and that project's underway. Cocoa High School and Endeavor Elementary were our 2 pilot projects, and then we're now buying materials for some of the rest of the project. So that is underway. And then also have the fiber optic project in the ET world that is under construction. The 2020 surtax program, I just wanted to give you kind of a summary of the myriad of things that we're doing with the 2020 surtax. That had a much broader framework, and so we're picking up things like track renewal, tennis courts, doing some auditorium projects, playgrounds. There's a lot of different things that we need to do in our schools, but that had been deferred for many years, especially given that we had such issues with air conditioning. So we got the big air conditioning out of the way, and now we're able to do some of these other things. We're still working electrical and roof renewal projects, and it's interesting for me because the problems that are coming to me now at our schools, a lot of them are electrical and roofs. So, the system kind of worked. Our initial work in air conditioning is where we needed to be, and now in the roof and the electrical side is where we need to be. So I feel pretty confident that we've made good decisions based on good data in terms of the investment of our surtax money. On the property sales side, we obviously have hired our realtor. We've sold the Neiman Heights property, and we have Sullivan Groves under contract. The buyer's in the due diligence period. Whispering Hills is on the market. Pineapple Avenue will be putting on the market once we get a little farther down the road with the transportation project. Our property sales have been going to capital, and we've been asking the board to allocate those to the transportation maintenance facility. We did have a gentleman contact us about purchasing properties for a charter school in the Palm Bay area. We talked about it internally and felt like we would prefer to keep our sites in the Palm Bay area for now, since we really don't know where that might lead. But that did come in had a call about 2-3 weeks ago about that. But I think for now, these are all the properties we're going to recommend that we sell. And then what's coming up on your agenda, the 5-year work program will be on the December 14th agenda. Dave's working on that, but you'll see all of these capital projects as well as the 2020 surtax program that was not in the last work program. It was approved prior to the referendum, so all that data will be in the work program coming up on your agenda in December. We'll also be updating our educational plant survey sometime next year in 2022, so that will be something that you see later in the year. We will be doing some spot surveys to add or delete facilities. So for example, if we're tearing down Satellite Bus, we will be bringing that as a spot survey. So those are everything that I've just talked about will end up in that process in some way, shape, or form. The attendance boundary process, you have that on your agenda tonight under information. We have the website is live, so if you have constituents that want to comment, they can go right to the website. They just click on I want to comment, and there's a form you can fill out and you can comment. Those comments will all be compiled and provided to you at your December meeting, so you'll see all of the public comment that comes in through that process. We also have a dedicated phone line that Karen Black answers directly, so if folks have questions about it, that number's on the website. The 4 projects that we have, or proposals we have for attendance boundary changes, the Meadow Lanes to Discovery, our principals are contacting the affected families. Apollo to Imperial and Heritage to Bayside, we have virtual stakeholder meetings scheduled the week after the holiday. And then the Dolores Satellite to Cocoa Beach, we're continuing to work with the base liaison and anticipate either an in-person or a virtual stakeholder meeting, potentially both. So we're just working on getting that scheduled. So these are in process, and you'll see more information at your December meeting. And then just to summarize things that will be coming to the board in the near future, we have obviously the attendance boundary process, the 5-year work program, the reallocation of sales surtax for transportation, and then the construction funding plan for the Vieira area middle school or middle school act. We need to talk with the board about that later in 2022. And then just to circle back to, the things that I worry about and that I feel like we've done a good job in facilities of trying to support the educational team, but I feel like we can do a better job now as a teammate with all of our other cabinet members, trying to make sure that Brevard is the educational choice. And a lot of the investments that we're making in facilities, I think, will help that. So we're spending a little bit more time talking with, for example, the athletic folks in student services and how we can better support athletic programs, the arts programs, CTE programs. What can we do here in Brevard to make us a desirable place to send your children for education? So we're trying to be a really good partner in this broader discussion. So as best we can, we want to collaborate, and I think the revenue side of capital investment is good and healthy, and I feel like that gives us a lot of opportunities to do more things. And so we want to make sure that we're talking to all our partners and being a good partner in our investments. So, this is my favorite Einstein quote about we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Board members, questions?
Hey, Sue. So you talked a lot about middle school X in Vieira. I just have a couple of questions. So I know previously you had presented possibilities of where it would be, and I know we're talking a lot about construction today, but where are we in terms of the process of a location and land? And again, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there was some conversation about contingency about the property next to Vieira High School being part of the conversation. Where are we in that process, and what's the timeline for that?
So we own the property right next to Vieira High School, and that was designated in the deed as for educational purposes. So it has to be used for educational purposes. When we started looking at a middle school in this area, we thought that perhaps a site farther south would be a better choice for us. I think that going forward, there will be opportunities for additional secondary facilities in the Vieira area, and our agreement with the Vieira company provides for additional sites for elementary, middle, and high schools. So we may very well acquire the site that we were interested in acquiring. It just will be in the future as the growth happens farther south. So with Middle School X, our intention is to use the site that is immediately adjacent to Vieira High School for the project that we're working on now. Did I answer your question? Ms.
Yes,
Jenkins?
So I think I must have misunderstood in the past, so that's kind of new information to me, because I thought that the conversation about the next one would be in a different.
And it was, so you are not
Okay.
mistaken about that.
Okay.
You are correct.
Okay.
We felt that farther south was a better choice. However, the ability to deliver a school on that site with things like roads, water, and sewer
Right.
isn't there for us right now, and the VR company is not moving as fast as we would like them to move for that purpose. So they're on their own time frame, and when I met with them about that very topic, they said it was going to be 4 to 5 years before we were able to build on the site farther south, and they felt like we had a site that was viable. We, as a staff, looked at it again, and we feel like this site is viable, and so we're okay with moving forward on the site that we have.
Okay. And then my other question is about the firefighting academy at Pompey High. So I know that we had discussed as a board to put that forward to speak to our state appropriations committee about funding for that. I'm aware, obviously, what you presented, where the funding sources are coming from, but I'm just curious, is that still part of the conversation?
So I wanted to make sure that we had resources, so that's my role. I would assume state appropriation still. Russ Bruin's nodding his head. So I would say those are parallel paths.
Okay.
And if the funding is available through the state, and even if it's partially funded through the state, that'll work great too. So we won't have that available until at least July if it happens. So we'll just work with Russ Bruin's office and whatever legislative office ends up handling this if there is an appropriation.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much.
Ms. Campbell?
All right. Well, I appreciate you talking about being a good partner, and I have to say, from everything that I've seen over the last 3 years, you have been an amazing partner in your whole team, and just always thinking about how to support all of the programs, and I see cabinet nodding. So thank you for doing that, because I don't know how other districts do it, but I'm just going to assuming they don't do it as good as we do here. So I've got a couple questions. When we talk about, we've talked about the things that worry you about the proportionality of our students in Brevard going to charter, going to the scholarship programs. But I know, at least in my area in the South, that those charter schools have frequently helped alleviate some of the pressure when we weren't ready to move yet. And our area is not stopping growth, even all around my house. So, but I had a question when we talk about student stations. So those, the dollars, the impact fees, you have to create new student stations, but it doesn't necessarily automatically have to mean that we're going to have additional students at that school or in the district as a total. The reason why I ask is, when we build middle school X, we're going to be taking students away from 2 of our middle schools in particular that are full, or are getting full, or already full, to that school. But so some of it will be shuffling rather than additional, but it's still, as long as it's new student stations, like we are building new classrooms, and it doesn't have to be an overall total, right?
Correct. So an example of what would make me uncomfortable is if we were tearing down a school and putting up a new school, and the
Right.
number of student stations was exactly the same.
Gotcha.
So if we did tear down a new school, or tear down an old school, build a new school that had 50% more, that 50% more would be impact fee eligible. So that's, but as long as we're building more student stations,
Right.
it is fine.
And in this area in particular, I mean, there's no way of knowing what the community will end up doing, but if we have, I know it's been spoken before that, some families are not sending their student, they want their students to be closer to home, and so rather than sending them to DeLar or Kennedy, wherever they're zoned, they're sending them somewhere else. If we have a middle school closer at hand, we might actually draw some of those families back into Brevard Public Schools because they'll be, in their backyard.
I think that's likely.
And so that had to do with the firefighting academy too. We won't necessarily be adding, hopefully it will be drawing new students, but it will create new stations even if the population of the school doesn't increase automatically.
Correct.
Okay. You talked about we've set aside some of those impact fees for additional classroom spaces at our South Area elementary schools. The one that's closest to where Emerald City is supposedly going to be built is Sunrise. Do our schools down that way, Sunrise and maybe West Side, have Columbia maybe have the capacity on the property to have those additions? Some of them already have those addition type buildings. I'm assuming we're talking about the ones like we have in the back of Jupiter and Endeavor and all those that are all the same.
From memory, I think so.
Okay.
But I'd want to actually go look at the aerial to be sure.
Right. I mean, especially Sunrise, it's all wide
It's
open
all
out
right,
there.
Yeah, and I've been to Columbia, and I believe there's some property there. And that is one area where we have a tract that's just down the street from Columbia.
Okay.
So we could, in fact, build a Columbia annex of sorts if that became necessary.
Okay. Because I know the additions will take a lot less time if we need it
Yes.
than, and Sunrise is filling up pretty quickly. Does the $25 million for a new elementary school, I know that's about what we spent up here, but does that include the land, or was that just the construction? Because we were given the land.
That was just the construction.
Okay, so if we don't have a spot in the south, we'll either need to be given the land maybe by the developers if the contract, like you talked about the conversations that we need to be in on, or we'll have to purchase that separately.
Correct.
Okay, so we need to be on the conversations of being given the land.
Correct.
All right. I think that's it. Just the slide that you had about the charter schools that are moving forward, I just, I don't have the data trends for this, but, we only have currently 2 charter schools that have high school age grades. I do know that there has been a trend in one of them in particular that as the charter school students get into the high school grades, that there is some attrition from the charter schools back into BPS schools because of the opportunities, because of the dual enrollment, athletics, fine arts programs, whatever it is, opportunities that they want, Cambridge program, IB, things like that. So I don't necessarily see that changing anytime soon. So, there is, who knows, as it changes, there's going to be increase, but we do definitely have the opportunity to capitalize on that movement back, at least, because we do continue to offer wonderful programs that some schools just can't offer because they're not big enough or they don't have the capacity in other ways to do it. So we'll keep doing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Susan, got anything? I just have I have one comment and one quick question. So first, Dave and Karen, thank you so much for making those connections with our municipalities and being right there at the beginning of those conversations to make sure that we are capitalizing on opportunities to be able to remain strong, right, and take advantage of those situations. And then with the attendance boundary, I know you mentioned that one of the schools, the principal was reaching out to those impacted families. What is our communication plan for the others?
So I left out an important sentence. We have mailed letters to every family that is affected by the Apollo to Imperial Estates, as well as the Bayside 2 Heritage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, anyone have anything else? All right, thank you, Ms.
Thank
Ham.
you.
We are now going to hear the update on Head Start with Dr. Wendy Smith, Director of Elementary Leading and Learning. Dr. Smith.
You're like, well, I like.
Yes.
Next time, Dr. Smith, you need to bring student representatives.
I know the picture.
There was consensus of the board that you can't come back unless you bring students. So.
Leave now.
Dr. Smith, the icon is right on the desk.
I got it. Thank you. I appreciate you putting it up there. Now I know how my mom felt when I would bring my kids over to her house. She would say, I don't want you to be here. I just want your kids. So now I'm going to pay back, but that's okay.
We love you too, Dr. Smith. It's just, you know.
She told me she loved me too, but I don't know. She loves it more. So you can look at the two like cute little pictures of our Head Start kids, and maybe one day we'll be able to bring some to share with you. So I will start with the vision and mission, as always. And it's basically not to read to you, but to serve not only our students, but our families in that wraparound service model for Head Start. Today's agenda will include the baseline grant, which is our community and self-assessment, some goal data for you, enrollment, we've had boots on the ground for us, dental hygienist update, and how we are coaching our teaching teams as well as our family advocates. So first and foremost, our baseline grant. This baseline grant is written for the next 5 years of our grant cycle, which will actually be year 11 through 15 for Brevard Public Schools. And it is to begin on July 1st, 2022. The process for developing the baseline grant includes a community assessment, a self-assessment, long-term goals that span the 5-year grant cycle, as well as objectives. So the community assessment is basically helps to determine our needs of the community, and it's used to help write the baseline grant. We've contracted with Mananiola, a company who is helping us with the community assessment, and the results will be presented to the board in December of 2021. The self-assessment is where we look at our program from within for our strengths and weaknesses. So with the community assessment and the self-assessment, we combine those to write the baseline grant. The community assessment is looking at things such as the demographics of the community, housing, poverty, transportation, medical and dental opportunities, as well as current and future job opportunities. So as we write or use the community assessment and the self-assessment, we write long-term goals, like I said, that will span year 11 through 15. And the great thing we do is the long-term goals will align to what's right back there for us all to see and know: the district strategic plan, academic excellence, exceptional workforce, community connection, and operation sustainability. Lastly, we write objectives that are written in a SMART format that we write for every year, and the details or the actions are measured annually in order for us to try to meet our long-term 5-year goals. The long-term goals or the 5-year goals can change based on our community needs, and the objectives stay the same for the year based on what we want to have in the long-term goals of the 5 years. So what does that mean for you? Well, your participation is this. In February of 2022, a grant application and budget narrative will be submitted for your review and input. After receiving your review and input, and we make any corrections that you suggest, we will put it into a board agenda item in March of 2022. The grant must be signed by the board chair, Ms. Belford, as well as our policy council chair, and then it is due April 1st, 2022. Next, I have some goal data for you. This gold assessment data is used for us to progress monitor 3 times per year, and is compared, you can compare it to kind of like a student portfolio. This particular slide shows the program-wide outcomes of our HeadStart 3-year-old program for the first checkpoint. So the data are used to identify professional resources and training for our teaching teams. The baseline data will then be compared to the second assessment or checkpoint in February to review our student growth and progress. The categories, as you can see, are social emotional, physical, language, cognitive, literacy, and mathematics. And they are measured as below expectations, meets expectations, or exceeds expectations. So this was fall of 2021 for 3-year-olds. And on the very next slide, you will see our 4-year-old Head Start VPK data with the same components. The data is different, or the lines are different, the measures are different, basically because there are more expectations for a 4-year-old than there are for a 3-year-old. So there are different expectations. I want to celebrate our enrollment with you. Our enrollment has increased by almost 20% this year. Last October, we were enrolled at 430 out of 624 funded slots. This past October, we were at 535 out of that 624 funded enrollment slots. And today, Ms. Barlow, we offered a seat to someone. As of yesterday, last night, we were at 552 out of 624 at 88% capacity. So when I'm talking about boots on the ground, that is our family advocates and our coaches and our teachers and our community reaching out to the community to see if we can get some more students enrolled. Our dental hygienist, we are celebrating her start. Miss Amanda Willis began in October after she was onboarded by the Department of Health. She is working right now to review our children's dental files and will implement all the things as you see on your screen. School-based preventative dental program, oral health screenings and assessments. She'll administer cleanings and fluoride. She will educate the parents as well as training our children and teachers and staff. Assisting families in finding a dental home and navigating those barriers if families have those. And also case management of students who require complex treatment or have financial barriers. The students are going to receive a comprehensive dental exam on site. Remember, a comprehensive dental exam on site, remember, at their school, through a telehealth consultant with a dentist. So they will actually see the pictures of the child's mouth and be able to suggest treatment. In addition to this dental service, it will also ensure that our program meets the compliance of our Head Start oral performance standards. Great things happening there. And finally, talking about our coaching, our teaching teams, and family advocates. As you've heard me mention before, we have instructional coaches. There are actually 4 of them. And we have moved from talking about having a teacher and 2 instructional assistants in every classroom to they are a teaching team. We don't want to know the difference between the 3 adults. They are a team. They are one to educate the kids. So these teaching teams have written action plans that were based on their own needs assessment. A coach helps write the goals with the teachers and the instructional assistants so that they can better serve our students. As of now, there have been 64 total goals written with our teaching teams for this semester. There'll be more for second semester. And they've been focusing on state literacy standards, class, which remember is the relationship between the student and the adult, conscious discipline, and our second step curriculum, which is our social emotional learning. And finally, new this year, we thought, well, that worked so well, coaching our teaching teams, let's coach our family advocates and have them become a partner. So they have actually partnered with the teaching teams or the teachers and the instructional assistants, because we have an advocate per school, and they wrote their own action plan based on their own needs assessment, mainly focused on relationship-based competencies to be able to support our family engagement. So as of now, for this semester, 20 goals have been written that include kindergarten readiness, family goals, increasing positive communication between the home and school, and different resources for families. Oh, I wish I could pull a small child out of the next room for you, but that's all I have. I thank you for your time. You know, you are our governing board and have, you know, such a tremendous say in governing our Head Start grant. And I thank you for your continued support. It is truly appreciated. So are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Ms. McDougall?
I have a question. I love that you have the boots on the ground and you're at 88% capacity. What barriers are we coming across to prevent people from either knowing about the program or signing their student into the program? So what are you encountering? What barriers do we have?
What we talk about with our family advocates and our coaches is there are still some parents, remember you have to be eligible to be able to attend a Head Start program. And even some of the eligible parents or families are still not quite there yet due to the times that we're in with COVID and things like that. I'm just not ready to send my 3-year-old.
So
I'll keep them one more year.
So it's still health related?
It is, and we do have some over-income students, but there's a ceiling on how many over-income students we can have. So it's a fine line that Ms. Barlow looks at on a weekly basis and goes to the individual child and sees if they qualify or if they need to be on the wait list because a more needy child might come. It comes, you know, every day or so. It's a revolving circle sometimes.
Thank you.
So,
Anyone else? Ms. Campbell?
Just really quick on those same lines, between the 3-year-old classes and the 4-year-old classes, is it seem to be one more than the other that we're off of our usual enrollment? Or is it about the same?
It's about the same. It fluctuates. You know, it just fluctuates so much. So we look at that and we meet and say, because we have 624 slots for our program. If we, with the community assessment, feel the need to have more 3-year-old classes and less 4-year-old classes for next year, we have that flexibility, actually on an annual basis.
Okay, so whatever our grant gets approved and everything, we can adjust that year to year.
Yes, 624 slots, and then we, with your help, get to decide.
With the new grant, do you anticipate, and of course I know the federal government can change it even in the middle of a cycle, but do you anticipate any changes from our current grant with the new grant as far as requirements or anything like that?
Not that we are aware of at this time. We don't have any new information.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Well,
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. You know how much we love your program and all the work that you guys do. And kudos on a great presentation. You just need to bring us some babies next time, okay?
I will. You hear that?
All right. Anyone have anything else before we adjourn the workshop? All right. Hearing no further business, this meeting is now adjourned.